Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rahman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about the security situation in Afghanistan. As we all know, that I won't call it civil war, but civil war-like situation is already, it is there. Now, the interesting part is that I was going through an article, a news story, and that was so interesting, saying that when Bagram Air Base was vacated by the foreign troops, in fact, they vacated it 2 hours earlier, and there was a total blackout after that, and the general who took over after that, the Afghan general, General Koistani, he was surprised that he wasn't even told that the last C-130 or C-117 to be exact has taken off, and they left in a hurry or something. Now, the interesting part is that all those vehicles and the armored personnel carriers and other equipment that they have left, it's about 1.3 million different items, starting from water bottles to these Humvees, just imagine. And they are under the control of all those who are into this business, and they are actually weighing them and selling them. Now, this is what is going on out there. This has become a great business. Just to give you this example, that this is the kind of attitude the Americans have shown, and the way they have left in haste and hurry has resulted in what is going on currently. You talk about the Taliban position. Yes, it is getting stronger by each passing day. They are capturing more districts. 7 more districts were captured yesterday. Just imagine the kind of strength they have, and without firing a single bullet. In certain cases, yes, there was resistance, but mostly the Afghan soldiers, they are ready to lay down their arms in front of the Taliban, and this is something which is very worrisome. But let's see where it leads, what exactly is going to happen, what sort of a proxy is left behind for Pakistan. No matter what happens in Afghanistan, one thing is for sure, that the fallout factor is going to be very severe, and that is going to be on Pakistan. So, how to manage that, and what sort of a planning do we need to have, what sort of a contingency plan do we need to have in place, and how to move forward, that is going to be a million-dollar question, and this is going to be the real challenge. Now, the government has also said, according to the information minister, that perhaps they want to engage the Baloch individuals either from BRA or BLA, and they'll be a part of that group where they'll be talking to them and negotiating with them and listening to their grievances. Now, let's see, that is going to be again something very important. This was earlier also, this task was given to Rehman Malik Saab when he was the interior minister, and I still remember he used to use this word, Naraz Baloch. So, let's see if those Naraz Balochs are ready to negotiate, to talk, and let's see what sort of demands do they have in their mind. We'll be talking about that. But let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. We have with us in our studio on my right is Nasir Ali Khan Saab. Nasir Saab is a former ambassador and senior analyst. Thank you so much, Nasir Saab, for your time. And we also have with us Dr. Nazir Hussain Saab, expert on foreign affairs and international relations. Dr. Saab, pleasure to have you, sir. And we also have with us Major General retired Ijaz Awan Saab, who is a senior analyst. General Saab, pleasure to have you on the show, sir. Thank you so much. General Saab is joining us on Skype. So, Nasir Saab, first of all, sir, the interesting part is that the current situation in Afghanistan is not only fluid, it's very dangerous also. The way the Taliban are taking over, we never thought that they will actually do that in such a short span of time, and the way they are doing it. I mean, no resistance is seen there, sir, and perhaps it seems that at the end of the day, this is what is the future. But sir, if you allow me, sir, before you answer that, we have prepared a report. Let's see how close your comment is according to the data which we have. Let's show the report.
The pulling out of US-led NATO forces from Afghanistan is proof that the United States' use of force in Afghanistan miserably failed in achieving the required outcomes and implementation of the respective agendas. Moreover, the world's most powerful armed forces failed miserably in preventing, reacting, and rebuilding Afghanistan in the realm of right to protect. The proof of this failure lies in the fact that since the US-led NATO forces announced to end this endless war, the militancy and the civil war-like situation in Afghanistan starts aggravating. According to media reports, the Afghan Taliban have already succeeded in controlling 142 districts and are fighting for control of about 170 more, with their eyes set on conquering Kabul. The Kabul government seems helpless in front of the Taliban, especially without the assistance of its foreign protectors. Approximately 1,037 Afghan security force personnel have fled across the Tajikistan border due to swift Taliban advances in northern Afghanistan. However, Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid has hinted at the dialogue and peace talks with the Kabul government and also said that they would present a written peace proposal to the Afghan government by August 2021.
So the date, 4th of July has passed, sir. Most of these soldiers, they have vacated. Bagram Air Force is empty now totally. And the way the Taliban are taking over, sir, it seems that the game is on. Your take, Nasab?
Well, first of all, it's very unfortunate that we have come to a stage where there is definitely violence. There was an agreement with Mr. Trump in early last year in which they promised to cease fire. But that was actually to cease fire against American troops and not necessarily Afghan security forces. So as far as the situation presently is concerned, the Taliban consider themselves victors in a war of 2 decades. They were able to resist, continue to exist, continue to be a major player. And today, when you have the forces retreating, or I should say leaving Afghanistan, they consider themselves victors in this long struggle and having a right to the so-called spoils of war. So as far as their mood is concerned, they are in no mood to give too many concessions to the Afghan government. Now, the other factor is that I believe since their last regime, the Taliban have matured, they have changed, they have become more flexible or more pragmatic in many ways. And you can see this by the fact that when early this year, President Biden decided that he would review this whole agreement with the Afghan Taliban. Since then, all the Afghan government has done is basically wait for something to happen, whereas the Taliban have been traveling to Iran, to Russia, to Pakistan to lobby for their point of view. This is something I feel is different to the last regime. The last regime was pretty isolated and isolationist, and they were not too interested.
Recognized by only 3 countries.
Indeed. They were not interested too much in what international opinion said about them. Today the situation is very different, and they do understand that the economy itself, for instance, in Afghanistan, as far as the revenue of the Afghan government is concerned, for instance, it's about $2 billion. Now, if there was no support from the international community, you cannot even afford to pay the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police or maintain them with the total revenue. And that's about 307 billion rupees or so, right? That is less than the budget of Balochistan, which has 1/3 of the population of Afghanistan. So the economy is very important, and I think the Taliban will understand if we talk to them about the potential that exists, the dividends that peace will bring, because it is in our interest that there is no violence. We have said that we will not support anybody who tries to take over militarily. However, we have said that. That doesn't mean that they would listen to us. It's just that it is
our own wish.
It is our stated position that we will not help anybody who wants to take over, let's say, Kabul militarily by force. We are very interested that there should be peace. So it's our job that we convince them of the dividends of peace, the advantage, because the potential is tremendous.
Yep.
The potential in Afghanistan economically is huge, and people, as far as public opinion is concerned, the public's one single wish is for this strife of 4 decades to finally somehow come to an end. One of the reasons that they were popular in their first instance was that they brought a semblance of peace to Afghanistan.
And that was, I think, a great achievement at that time. But Dr. Saab, another very important point. Now, talking about the legitimacy, when you talk about having a proper election in Afghanistan, we all know the problems they go through, the kind of voter turnout that we have seen earlier, the kind of conflict. I mean, if candidate A is winning, candidate B is also declaring his victory, and then there is a confusion, and exactly not once, rather twice. The point is, sir, that the Afghan Taliban at the end of the day is a reality. Yes, they are gaining ground, they are, mustering the support. But interestingly, this time it started from the north, where they had weaknesses, and they're coming down. At the end of the day, if a lot of people believe that proper elections, if they are held and they are free, fair and transparent, the Taliban support is not that much. Maybe the street power is there, and that is what we all see, and we all believe that, well, they can. But having said that, once again, sir, do you believe that the anti-democratic mindset of the Taliban and the Sharia and the tribal Afghan Sharia that they want to have in place, is it going to work, or there's going to be a total conflict when it comes to that, sir? Women rights, and though they want that, we will give you the peace agreement in writing and all, yet is that a feasible formula, sir?
I think let me take further what Ambassador Saab has mentioned, that 2 decades, in fact the 4 decades of violence and war and traumas and psychological aspects are compelling the common Afghanistan people that we should go for peace. And Afghanistan has lived true to its reputation. 2 things. It has been, and it has now proved very rightly, that Afghanistan is the graveyard of the superpowers, the British, the Russians and the Americans. But the way the Americans have left Afghanistan high and dry, it also has validated the reputation of the United States of America, that they do everything and then they left everything to the regional countries and the UN, and they left.
They came here to eliminate Al-Qaeda,
yes,
and the Taliban, but interestingly leaving behind so many other groups.
You must have heard an apology from the State Department day before yesterday about Osama bin Laden. So now they are proving anything. But having said that, the Taliban are no more those.
Dr. Saab, sorry to interrupt you. There was another story that this invasion of Afghanistan was planned much prior to 9/11 incident.
Could be. There are certain stories also about one journal asking that we have been assigned the task of destroying 7 Muslim states, and one by one we destroyed, and Afghanistan was the most weakest, so we did that. Anyway, now Taliban are no more the same ideological force. They are a reality, not in terms of our non-state actor, but now the state actor, in fact the sub-state actor, but they are a reality. See, they were ideological rival of Iran. They are negotiating with them. They are ideological rival to Russians, now they are negotiating with them. And now they have realized that the governance comes through not force, but comes through making the people to believe that we are the only power in Afghanistan who can, as Ambassador Saab mentioned, who can bring about peace. Now again, we have been talking from this podium very rightly, all of us, that the government of Afghanistan is not beyond Kabul, and that has also proved. One by one province after another province, one district after another district, they are going. Even the ANA, the Afghan National Army, is surrendering. So they realize that Afghan.
They are given $130 by the Taliban to lay down their arms and go back home. I mean, that's the traveling expense they are giving. The TADA, as they call it.
It has proved that. But having said that, I think there is a silver lining, and that silver lining is that previously it was only, as you mentioned and Ambassador mentioned, previously there were only 3 countries who recognized the Taliban regime between 1996 to 2001. But now there are regional countries who are in direct contact with different Taliban groups, Qatar and Iran and Russia and China and even India. So I think they are now being accepted as a reality who are going to form the government. So therefore they are behaving like that. They are, and therefore as of today probably, they have asked, they have in fact informed that we will be having a written negotiation,
exactly,
a written agreement next month or next week, whatever. So they are ready to negotiate. They are ready to. But I believe the silver lining for Pakistan is, and this is a moment of reckoning for Pakistan foreign policy, that are we going to bandwagon with the United States of America again, or we have to have a regional approach like with Russia, with China, with Iran to have peace and stability in Afghanistan. Mind you, Taliban, as I mentioned, are no more the same ideological force and same control of Pakistan over the Taliban. Now they are negotiating by themselves. So therefore, I think Prime Minister was wise enough to offer the olive branch to the whatever you say Naraz Baluch, because that's a very soft underbelly for Pakistan.
I think they're going for the contingency planning now. The backup plan.
I think it must have a contingency planning, but it must have a long-term planning, because let's see in KPK probably.
Dr. Saab, the government also, whether it was Pakistan People's Party at that time, Rehman Malik Saab was very clear and categorical that we need to talk to them. Nothing happened, if you remember. There was no conclusion.
You are absolutely right, but the issue is that at least you are giving them an olive branch, you are giving them an option, so that the government, the people, and of course the state itself would not be in a dark that we are not doing enough. And I think the Prime Minister spent a couple of days in Gwadar offering them so many things, development funds, etc., etc. And I think two approaches. One is a domestic approach, which the government has adopted, and the other is a foreign policy approach, which I think all these regional states, we must. And one good thing about, nobody is talking about that, Indian influence in Afghanistan is reducing tremendously, and that is the case where Pakistan should build upon its foreign policy issues there.
Let's take this point to Jalal Ijaz now. Jalal Saab, if Taliban eventually, they make their government, what sort of a message is going to be there for countries like Pakistan and Iran, number one? And do you believe that if they are, holding the power, that means that the influence of the Indians, that is going to be reduced? Is that correct, sir?
Well, thank you very much. I think both the worthy guests have highlighted the most important aspects of Afghanistan, and I fully agree with them. Yes, the present-day Taliban, they are not only victorious, they are very flexible and amenable to advice, though they will not take dictates from anyone, and not somebody should try to dictate them. They would let's leave the solution to the people of Afghanistan. But there is a burning desire in all the factions in Afghanistan, and particularly about the masses in Afghanistan. They wish to live in peace, and they deserve peace. The Taliban have realized this thing, and they are open to negotiation, and they have already put forward an agenda that in the month of August they are going to talk to Ashraf Ghani government, and if Karzai wants to be part of that settlement, I would say the status quo forces till this day, who benefited from the regime and the funding and support of the American-led coalition, they are willing to negotiate and talk to them for a peaceful settlement in Afghanistan. So that's a very good development and a good start that they wish to make. The regional countries need to help them to find a negotiated settlement in Afghanistan. As regards India, Indian worries are two, and they are writing on the wall. The first one is that they, despite having invested about $3 billion in Afghanistan, the freedom of action that they enjoyed, the foothold that they enjoyed, the liberty that they enjoyed in Afghanistan to operate against Pakistan, against CPEC, and against developments in Balochistan, the way they exploited those weaknesses, that platform will not be available to them anymore. And they have already started lifting their people they have closed down 3 of their consulates. They are airlifting more than 3,500 people that they wish to bring them back to India. And this is what Ajit Doval went to talk to them. To the Taliban, they want a peaceful exit from there. Having exited from Afghanistan, they will not enjoy that liberty of action, that freedom, that foothold to create instability in mainland Pakistan. This is one. Second, if the situation in Afghanistan is a source of motivation, if it inspires the people in Kashmir, Indian-occupied Kashmir, then this is a cause of worry for India, because people of Kashmir are fighting for their legitimate right, which is given to them by the United Nations, for the right of plebiscite. India has denied that, and they have thrown the UN resolutions out of the window and forcefully wish to absorb Kashmir and Ladakh into the Union territory and into the mainland of India. Now, this motivation, this lesson which the world is learning from Afghanistan, that you cannot forcefully, you can change or you cannot defeat the will of the people with the gun. If that becomes the motivation of Indian occupied Kashmir and the people of Kashmir who have been maimed, raped, and killed, then this is what worries India the most. So, on these two counts, India is the biggest loser in the present development in Afghanistan. To the contrary, I think it's a writing on the wall that Americans have left without a sense of victory. They have left with a very heavy moral burden, because I personally feel, and I think both the honorable guests would agree with me, in America had the resources, they had the time of 2 decades, they had the military might with them, 5-year bases, 140,000 troops, and having spent $1.5 billion, they did not, and they exercised complete influence and control over the forces that were in power. They did not use all these 5 things to bring peace and normalcy in Afghanistan. Had they devoted these resources, time, and their influence to bring back peace into Afghanistan, they would have left with a sense of victory, with a moral high, which unfortunately today they have not. So since they left a burden onto the regional countries, now I feel it is the responsibility and time to make a move for the regional countries sharing borders with Afghanistan, not to field their own horses in this war, not to, I would say, not to pick the like-minded people and fund them. It is the responsibility of the region, Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, and Central Asian states, to convince, move in, and talk to all the factions of Afghanistan that they deserve peace, they should work for peace, and peace has a big promise for them in the times to come. So let's see how the regional countries play their cards, and the vacuum that America has left, how do they fill in morally, diplomatically, and politically to bring peace and normalcy in Afghanistan.
The way the Americans fled Afghanistan, especially, when you talk about that colonel, I'm forgetting his name, he said that we'll be leaving at this time, but they left 2 hours prior to that, and then there was a total blackout, which I earlier mentioned in my introduction also. That seemed very funny, because the general, his name is Koistani, Asadullah Koistani, he said that he wasn't even informed. Just imagine that, if somebody wants to take over, and you just vanish, and there is nothing left behind. So they left in a haste, they left in a hurry, and they never had this agenda of bringing peace in Afghanistan, to be very honest. Now, Nasir Saab, one important factor, and that is about the future of TTP. Do you think they will gel with the Afghan Taliban, or you believe they will be a separate entity which is going to be tackled separately? What about the future of these non-state actors like Daesh, IS, or for that matter, or these small splinter groups, Sharia Afridi's group, Hizbul Ahrar, Hizbul Tahrir, Sajna, and so on? I mean, there's a long list. Your take on that part, sir, because that is where the threat is, I believe.
Let me first talk about the Pakistani Taliban, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan has had a loose association with the Afghan Taliban, there's no doubt. But the reason that it came up primarily was because Pakistani government was compelled to go into areas which hitherto they never went into. And they were compelled to conduct military action, which was sometimes rather indiscriminate, which created a lot of bad will in those areas and made this small organization increasingly popular. Then there were other people from other areas, the Chechens and Uzbeks and all, that had to flee Afghanistan. They came and joined these people. They had a cause in saying that Pakistan has let us down, and Pakistan is siding with the Americans, and therefore we will go out and hurt Pakistan. But let me also...
But Pakistan is not at the moment, sir.
No, no. I'm saying the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the rise of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan primarily was not fighting the Americans. It was fighting Pakistani forces, Pakistani establishment. And how did it gain ground? It gained ground because we were compelled by forces in Afghanistan to go into the tribal areas. And this is something the Prime Minister had warned. Before he was Prime Minister, he had warned that we should not do this. Now, the reason this rose from there, as far as all these other organizations are concerned, you see, wherever there is a vacuum, all kinds of non-state actors will come in.
Absolutely. This is what has happened.
Even in the 20 years that the Americans and NATO forces were there, large areas of Afghanistan were controlled by the Afghan Taliban. Now, at that time, a lot of people came from a lot of different places who joined their struggle. So that is something that sort of evolved slowly. However, the Americans, as they continue to fail in Afghanistan, the tendency was to put the blame on Pakistan. Now, there are two problems with that. One, as you mentioned, there was resentment. The government's actions were unpopular. And the other thing was that it created different actors, even within Pakistan, that came and joined these people. People from Punjab went and joined.
Yes.
Right? And as far as the government or the security forces or the security establishment of Pakistan was concerned, by continuing to blame Pakistan, first they were saying do more, and then they finally started saying Pakistan is playing a double game, Pakistan is duplicitous. This not only affected Pakistan's image in the international community, it also affected our leverage with those Taliban that today the Americans want us to convince to bring to the negotiating table. So, having said that, today, despite everything, despite all the rhetoric, despite all the blame from the United States and from the Afghan government, Pakistan is still the country with the most leverage in bringing the Taliban to the table. So, this is something that is very important, but at the same time, the West should not overestimate our influence, because they have played a part in undermining that influence.
On one end, they used to tell you to go after the Haqqani network. At the same time, they wanted the Afghan Taliban to negotiate. I mean, I failed to understand what sort of policy they were following. But Nasir, another very important factor is that
when you allow me.
We do understand that the situation is very fluid, and we do not know what exactly is going to happen. But one thing is for sure, sir, there's going to be a lot of bloodshed, a lot of resistance from some other, maybe some of the big names, let's say the Uzbeks, Dostum for that matter, or few on the Panjshir side also might create some sort of, especially the son and the brother. And when we talk about Rashid Dostum, we've also learned that he has got a good, strong militia, very well armed and all. So they could pose some sort of resistance, but there is another possibility that, you know, rule your area and we'll rule ours, and we'll not, you know, disturb each other's matters for that matter. But now the problem, which I really believe is going to be the real problem, is that if there is a civil war-like situation, sir, according to the general estimate, it is believed that around 500,000 to 700,000 refugees will come in. And this was in fact told to me by Brigadier Mahmood Shah. So I had asked him that, what is that supposed to mean? I mean, that is going to be a lot of burden on us. He said, where we have been looking after 3,700,000 won't make any difference. But according to some very reliable sources, they believe that only through Chaman there could be 1 million people coming in to Pakistan. Forget about the rest of the points, because if there's a warlike situation, so there's no food to eat, you need to live, obviously, and you can't say no. That is going to be a lot of trouble for us, because a lot of people might come in who are actually the members of TTP for that matter, or Daesh, because whatever happened in Lahore, sir, that means that the Indians have a presence. They have their agents working here, and yes, they want to, hurt us, and they can. No matter how stiff your forces are, or what sort of fence you are having on the border. But sir, it is next to impossible to keep a check at that level, sir. Pakistan is a big country. Look at the population. That becomes a problem. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. There's no doubt this is a matter of great concern as far as I'm concerned, because the last time that we had this influx of, at one point up to 4 million even, we were assisted by the international community. At this time, it seems that we are being left virtually in the lurch, and especially in the last American regime, humanitarian causes got very little support, and so this is definitely a matter of concern. But when you talk about Abdul Rashid Dostum and the Taliban, whether there's a chance of conflict, yes, again, very concerning. There is a chance of conflict, but war is very expensive business. So now the question is, who will be funding?
So if Taliban, after even 20 years, they are in a position to conquer their own country, interestingly.
Yes.
So that means that there is somebody behind them. Perhaps they are having the support from the Russians also.
Well, the thing is,
and solid, tangible support.
When they had the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, the last regime, they actually managed to drastically cut the production of poppy. Okay, so the drugs were much, much less. When American and NATO forces came into Afghanistan, that poppy growing actually grew. Okay, and where does that money go? Where did that money go?
Were the Americans financing the war through that money? The way they have done,
I do not.
Whatever they have done
Yes,
in Latin America, I mean, it was the cocaine money basically spent for the CIA
I would not like
projects.
I would not like to speculate on that. But then again, it is said there were at least 4 players who got advantage of the increased drug trade during these last 20 years.
One was Hamid Karzai's brother who was murdered.
I'm not going to name anybody. Because I'm just saying, I'm not talking about individuals. In one case, there may be a family or somebody that from Pakistan facilitated this. But what I'm trying to say is, there was a time when they were concerned that the drugs are against Islam, that the drugs are going to bring a bad name to Afghanistan, and so they had drastically cut that.
Correct.
In the last struggle that they had with the Americans, they certainly were given a share of the drug trade by the 3 or 4 other players that were involved in this. Now the question is, traditionally, who were their financiers? On the other side, on Abdul Rashid Dostum's side, is it the Uzbeks? Is it the Tajiks? Are they actually in a mood to do something like that? So my guess is a lot of these people in the northern, as you mentioned, they went and attacked Badakhshan. Badakhshan borders Tajikistan and China. And a lot of soldiers, about 1,000 soldiers with their equipment, ran into Tajikistan. That is a very significant thing. And what I have seen in the past is that, you see, Afghan warlords, for instance, they have a huge stake in the areas they have been controlling for decades.
Absolutely.
Now, when they see that there is this great swell and there is this great danger that these people will sweep over us, they always find a way to come to some arrangement where they can, negotiate with these people. And sometimes, of course, the situation is so dire that they have to just escape. They have to run away. But there are a lot of hard feelings between the Northern Alliance and the Taliban, and it will be very difficult for us not to see any reprisals of any sort.
All right. Now, Dr. Saab, the future of the current government, sir, because Ashraf Ghani wasn't ready to hold new elections. He really wants that, his tenure should be complete. This is the second time he has become the president. Though I am not sure whether anybody who's going to listen to him, you know, on the kind of commands he's going to give. He's afraid of for his own life. He might, you know, we might hear that he has fled to UK or USA or something. But the point is, sir, that without the consent of all the parties, there cannot be permanent peace settlement in Afghanistan, number one. And secondly, how to form a government and what sort of a model to follow. Do you think that is going to be the real bone of contention? Because women's rights has become one issue, though the new generation of Taliban, they claim that we will. But sir, having said that, I mean, that old school of thought still prevails in their ranks. Unfortunately,
you are absolutely right. There are 3 points. One point, as highlighted by Mr. Saab, I believe, and this is my concerned opinion, that regional countries are not going to involve themselves physically now in Afghanistan. Yes, splinter groups here and there, because as Mr. Saab was mentioning, that
you mean that no proxies from certain countries inside Afghanistan?
State proxies, no state proxies.
Not even India?
No, yes, India, yes, of course, nobody is denying that. But let's talk about the regional countries who are bordering, as Mr. Saab, who are bordering the Afghanistan. Tajiks, they fled away. Now today, Tajiks have deployed 20,000 forces along the Afghanistan border. So don't want that flux or influx coming to their territory. The states joining or bordering Afghanistan would not be involved themselves physically as a state actor as previously it was. 1. 2. As I mentioned time and again, Afghanistan is Taliban are no more the non-state actor. They have ruled the country and they are in a position to rule the country. As before the program, Ambassador and myself, we were talking about that out of the 34 provinces, probably they are controlling 30 provinces. The real battle will be of Kabul. Now here is a danger. As you are mentioning that if they fled away, let's see, and Abdullah has the support still of the Northern Alliance, previously Northern Alliance. Yes, if Ashraf Ghani fleds away and Kabul is peacefully handed over to the Afghan Taliban, that will be the best bet. But I fear, because there are resistance forces within the Afghan army, and you know Afghans very well, they are very valor and pride and status, etc. So I fear the battle in Kabul, not in joining areas. 2. 3 is that, as you are mentioning, that people would be coming into Pakistan, that's a real fear, nobody denies that, but not to the tunes as previously it was happening, because Pakistan is already struggling with COVID, with revival of economy, with so many things. But please don't.
Today they also close the border crossing.
Please don't undermine one thing, probably, that Afghan Taliban also need finances to run their government.
Whosoever is going to rule will need that.
No. I'm talking about the Afghan Taliban now. Let's just forget about Ashraf Ghani, Abdullah. Now Taliban are coming to rule. So who will be supporting them? Qatar, Turkey, and some other states. Even Russia and China are ready, because if you spill over this violence into their territory, they are very
they can't afford that.
Chechnya, as previously it happened, Uighur and Xinjiang, they don't want, even Iran. So I think the situation is much more better for Pakistan or different than the previous ones. So I think the Taliban would like to prove that they are not that violent force, they are the people, they are the entity to govern Afghanistan for the sake of peace and stability of the region. And this is in the best, as General Awan has mentioned, it is in the best interest of the regional countries. Last word, the big losers are the Americans, because in the military jargon we say the differences, the disharmony between political objectives and the military objective. It was right from the very beginning, and we have been saying this, that these are not matching to each other. And in the military annals, it's proved that wherever there's a conflict between
very counterproductive.
So it is very. And the second loser is India. It invested so much and so many.
Is it wishful thinking, or is it?
No, it's not wishful thinking. I'm not saying out of the blue. It has proved right. Now Pakistan is capturing and catching each and every Indian agent who is coming into Lahore or some other, because it has now, see the info lab, the disinfo lab. So it is, the network is being broken up. I think it is a good omen for Pakistan.
It was operating since 2005-6, sir.
So they were.
And I still remember we did a show in 2007, and we
there were certain
the propaganda machine.
Certain think tanks who were involved into it. Certain things. But one good analogy which General Awan has mentioned, now this can rekindle the spirit of fight in Kashmir. That will be the testing moment both for Pakistan and for India and for, of course, the regional countries.
Now, General Ijaz Awan, obviously Kashmir situation is also very, very fragile. I mean, it's been almost 2 years since Article 370 was abrogated and a lot of issues there. Do you see the support of the Taliban for the Kashmir cause because they are Muslims, number one? Or you believe that the Taliban will, you know, just because the Americans, let's suppose if they are financing them for another 2, 3, 4 years or whatever the settlement is all about, they will in fact listen to them. And in that case, obviously, we know the kind of role the Indians will play or the kind of influence they have, though they have spent about $3 billion construction projects, hospitals, universities, libraries for that matter. And the youth of Afghanistan, sir, to be very honest, I mean, whenever you talk to them, whenever you get a chance to interact with them, sir, they really support the Indians, starting from the movies to music, you name it. Whereas when it comes to Pakistan, they believe that for some odd reason, Pakistan has never been very transparent with them, or we have played double games or stuff like that. Things can go wrong from that perspective, sir. Do we have a contingency plan? Are we looking at all the odds, General Awan?
Faisal Saab, before I answer this question, this is very straight and let me answer it straight away. First of all, let's not stretch the argument too far. Afghans are not going to go and fight in Kashmir. Nobody is going to encourage them. It's not going to happen. They don't have to fight. They have to respect the sovereignty of the people of Kashmir and their own. It's a disputed territory according to the UN resolution, and it will be solved as the UN resolution suggests or propose. The fear is, as I said, the Afghan victory, the Taliban victory in itself is an inspiration for the people in Indian occupied Kashmir. Not at all talking of any probability. I do not see any probability of Afghans going and fighting into India or fighting in Indian occupied Kashmir. That's not there. It is not appreciated. It would not be approved and would not be encouraged. But let me put the record straight. What Ambassador Nasir Saab has said something which is historically, I'm sorry to say, not correct. Let's put the record straight. Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan was not an outcome of the Pakistan army moving into former FATA or tribal areas. It is incorrect. What happened? When 9/11 happened, before 9/11, the freedom fighters that came to Afghanistan to liberate them of different origins, Arab and Africans, and the Taliban themselves, they had moved over and they were residing in former FATA along with the refugees. They were married in former FATA area, and their women were married to the local FATA people, and they were living there for the last 2 decades. Now, when 9/11 happened, and this American-led coalition decided to go into operations in Afghanistan, those people prepared to go and fight inside Afghanistan against the coalition led by America and approved by the United Nations. At that time, the government in Pakistan wanted them to get themselves registered, all those people who were living there. Get themselves registered, do not use the mainland Pakistan or the FATA area, and to go and fight against American-led coalition. This kind of fight will not be permitted by Pakistan. This was the bone of contention where they started to develop a feeling that probably Pakistan is curtailing their freedom of action. Now, this transpired into creation of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan when this negotiation was going on between the governor of KPK, the core commander of KPK, with Naik Mohammed. And unfortunately, Naik Mohammed was drawn by the Americans. Yeah. He had agreed not to fight from there and to cooperate with the government of Pakistan and convince the people not to use mainland Pakistan or FATA for operations into Afghanistan. But he was drawn by the Americans. And when Americans went for another strike into Damadola, where 80 students were killed who were in that mosque, American, at that time, very regrettably and very unthoughtful of the regime of President Musharraf, that they owned
Pakistan
that
admitted it, I remember.
instead of blaming America. Now, when this was owned up, they turned against Pakistan army, and that is how the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan became a force. They united with the help of those freedom fighters who were residing in FATA, and they started resisting against Pakistan army. And then as a reaction, we had to move the army into FATA area. And this was a reaction against Damadola, that training center of Mardan, the Punjab Regimental Training Center. The first suicide bombing took place in that mainland because we tried to cover up the folly of the Americans of using force inside Pakistan. So that is the historical context. Let's read it that way. And that is how this Tehreek-e-Taliban force emerged, and they started operating against Pakistan army. Now coming to your question as to what will happen or what are the probabilities of Indian influence in Afghanistan. India will try. They have invested $3 billion, but they do not share the border, and Taliban will not allow, because Taliban is the only force that can deny use of soil of Afghanistan to Daesh, to Al-Qaeda, to ISIS, or to any other Hezbollahs and Hizb ut-Tahrir, those who are existing there. Unfortunately, America neither eliminated them, nor did they share the intelligence according to the intelligence sharing formula with Pakistan. Till this day, they are quiet as to what is their number, what were their stronghold, why in 20 years they failed to operate them against them, why in 20 years they failed to eliminate them. Taliban are the only force who can deny the use of soil of Afghanistan.
All right. All right, General Saab, since we are running out of time, but thank you so much for your input. Nair, it was a pleasure to have you. Dr. Saab,
Thank you.
Always great to have you on the show, sir. That's all we have for this, Saab. Inshallah, I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.